What's up, Team Tobias? What's up, Sandusky, Ohio? Lane Haymont here for the Literary Lens podcast with Ann Rose and Jackie Lipton. Oh, that's I'm not. It's not your Literary Lens
It's
podcast. It's
not.
your
Not
Quelling
today.
Your Query Conundrums.
Yes.
Oh, it's one of those days. One of those days.
Do we
Okay,
have our
so
coffee? Do you have some coffee, Lane?
I
'Cause I
do. It's
feel
the
like you.
evil coffee that you don't like.
I don't have any
But it's
coffee.
coffee.
I want some coffee.
Okay, so Anne, why don't you start us off? We're doing a query that we're quelling.
This querier has some conundrums, and they are hoping that we can help them. I think so. Todd pulled this one out of the inbox for us, and I have never seen it before, and we're just going to go ahead and read it, and hopefully, I do okay because I'm not a very good out loud reader. So, and I'll probably pronounce things wrong, especially if it's in fantasy, because that's just the way it is. So, okay, let's try. Dear Anne Rose, that's me. Your interest in women centered stories that face tough topics makes me think you will like my upmarket novel title, complete at 90,000 words. This dual timeline story is told through the alternating POVs of younger sister Sarah and significantly older sister Casey. It will appeal to readers who enjoy the complicated family relationships in the work of Danny Shapiro. It will appeal to readers who enjoy complicated family relationships. Content note: suicide. Okay, so there you go. We'll just do it that. Sarah Leonard is a driven working mother who lives on Cape Cod with her family. When her older sister dies by suicide, Sarah's heartbreak threatens to decimate her personal and professional lives as she becomes obsessed with understanding why Casey died and finding someone to blame. An enormous truck unloads the contents of Casey's storage unit into Sarah's garage, and she excavates, thank you, that's the word, and she excavates her sister's life, finding evidence of a nefarious reform school and possible domestic violence. Sarah grows determined to protect Casey's legacy and ensure her sister did not die in vain. She must learn to find her way back to the woman she wants to be for her family, herself, and her community while honoring Casey. Casey Morris comes of age as a queer person in the harrowing 80s and 90s. After her mother kicks her out, her father and stepmother send her to a rural reform school that is later shut down by the state of New Hampshire. When Casey's undiagnosed mental illness meets substance misuse and societal familial rejection, self-destruction seems unavoidable. But she is resilient, going to college and finding joy in her work and relationships, until at age 50, a perfect storm of events culminate in her suicide. My work has appeared in places. Something I don't want to read. This is their bio because we want to be as okay. This manuscript has had a sensitivity reader for Casey's POV. I've included a synopsis in the first blank pages and would be a delight to send you the manuscript. Sincerely, author. Okay.
Quick question, because I know we're not coming back to the bio. There's a sensitivity read. Does the author identify whether they themselves are a member of the queer community?
They do not say.
Okay, so if they are, that would be something worth putting in the bio.
Yeah, I think that maybe that's part of Casey's point of view is why, and maybe why they have the sensitivity.
Yeah, that tracks. Yeah.
Okay, that's a good question because I was thinking it was maybe just for the suicidal.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm not 100% sure, but
yeah. So, okay. So there it is. There's the query. So, what do we think?
I think it sounds incredible just from all the. It sounds very moving and emotional, and I was focused on the story as opposed to the mechanics of it.
Right.
Yeah, the query itself. So I was.
Right. Well,
so I guess that's a good query. That's a good query.
All right, so let's break it down a little bit. So upmarket, 90,000 words. Sounds good. that sounds fair for a novel like this. I would probably, it just says upmarket novel. It's probably women's fiction. I think she could probably easily
Yeah.
say. So maybe just to niche in that where it's going to sit a little bit more wouldn't be bad. So Sarah Leonard,
Leonard?
Leonard,
Leonard.
Leonard. Thank you. Sarah Leonard is a driven working mother who lives on Cape Cod with her family when her older sister dies by suicide. Sarah's heartbreak threatens to decimate her personal professional lives as she becomes obsessed with understanding why Casey died and finding someone to blame. An enormous truck unloads the contents of Casey's storage unit into Sarah's garage, and she excavates her sister's life, finding evidence of a nefarious reform school and possible domestic violence. Sarah grows determined to protect Casey's legacy and ensure her sister did not die in vain. She must learn to find her way back to the woman she wants to be for her family, herself, and her community while honoring Casey. Okay, so it seems like that's pretty contained in like what Sarah's story is going to be, because she's going to be one of the points of view and like what she wants. The stakes aren't completely clear. Like, what happens if she doesn't do these things? Like, is there any kind of maybe scandal, or like what's the worst case scenario involved in this situation if she is unable to do these things? So that's one piece of the puzzle that we're missing, that could maybe amp up this query or this pitch just a little bit more, in my opinion. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with I was thinking about that as you were reading. And on the one hand, every book does need stakes, and we've talked about it before, and there clearly are, I think, stakes in this book. And I do find this point of view and very contained and compelling. So I was kind of on the fence, because I'm like, niggling in the back of my mind is, well, what's the worst that can happen if she does, like, because she's not like clearing her sister's name, she's just sort of self-actualizing herself as she finds out what happened to her sister. It's probably enough. I'd probably read it anyway, but I do agree that agents and editors see a lot of these, and if you could just sort of throw something in there about what's the worst that can happen if. So yeah,
the not dying in vain and the clearing her reputation kind of has me thinking, well, what's in there? And in order to, like you said, up the query, I think we need to know the stakes. So what happens if she doesn't, quote unquote, clear her name, or her sister dies in vain?
Yeah.
And also, if there's a hint of, I think you said domestic abuse, I mean, there might be something about the stakes involved in unmasking the family member.
That's possible.
Possibly.
I do want to give this writer some props for using proper terminology, especially when it comes to suicide, because she does clearly state when the sister dies by suicide. And I think that's really important to make sure that you're using terms that are appropriate for the topics that you're talking about. So good job, writer, for doing that. A lot of times I see improper language being used around suicide, and that always is kind of a red flag for myself. So, all right, we'll move on to the next part. Casey Morris comes of age as a queer person in the harrowing 80s and 90s. After her mother kicks her out, her father and stepmother send her to a rural reform school that is later shut down by the state of New Hampshire. When Casey's undiagnosed mental illness meets substance misuse and societal family rejection, self-destruction seems unavoidable. But she is resilient, going to college and finding joy in her work and relationships, until at age 50, a perfect storm of events culminate in her suicide. So I think this sets us up for an interesting kind of mystery, maybe. And again, but I think that amping that up just a little bit here, I think would be useful.
Yeah, I think this is where I really felt that sort of the stakes needed to be. This was the bit where I was thinking, okay, so what's the connective tissue, because it seems very much to me that with the first point of view, there is this mystery to solve. There's this mystery to unravel, and there are stakes attached to that. And the bits from this sister's point of view are going to give you the clues to that mystery. What we're getting in this paragraph is a voluminous amount of information about this person's life. And I'm actually quite curious as to how this author is going to pull this whole thing off in 90,000 words, because this is a huge life. And then you have the other POV as well. I'm thinking that this will be littler bits interspersed as the first sister is solving the mystery. But I think that's for me where I want to see some stakes or consequences. I don't want to, if I just read this paragraph by itself, I'd be like, wow, this is there's a queer person, and there's, psychological issues, and there's trauma, and there's like all of this stuff. But what is the reason that we're engaging with it?
Lane.
I totally agree. I kind of felt more connected, I think, to this paragraph than maybe you two, because it felt very stakes high. But I also felt like
there's a lot of conflict, I think,
yes,
is what's being set up here. There's a lot of conflict here on the page, but the stakes still aren't super clear, because we obviously know the end of Casey's story, but we don't know what it is that gets her to that point. And so those would be the stakes in which we're kind of missing that piece, which maybe we don't find that out here in the query, because again, it's a mystery, and we maybe don't want to know that in advance of reading the project. That would be something you'd say for the synopsis, but yeah, it's kind of, it just needs that just one little to really hammer it in. I can't even put it into words.
Can I say a little something about stakes that you're welcome to cut, because this may be getting too I don't know, getting too much into my own head, but I often think that authors confuse the stakes for the character, not confuse them, but don't think about the stakes for the reader. Because when I'm thinking about stakes, I'm thinking about, like, look at this character, high stakes, she's going to die if she doesn't get. But what are the stakes for me as a reader? Why am I investing in that? What is there that makes it relatable to me? And does that make sense, or am I just okay?
Yeah, it's the why should I care moment.
Yeah.
And not to be an asshole, right? About, obviously she's had a tough life, but also we want to be able to care for this character and want to go on her journey. So that's a relevant piece of the puzzle. Now, end of the day, I would absolutely check out these pages and see
me too.
How it was set up. I would 1000% read the synopsis to figure out how the story is structured, and how we're are we doing back and forth? How is this equaled out? Like how are we doing this project? So I'm definitely very interested in this, in the structure, in the stories, in both stories of both women's lives. So I would look at the pages. Lane, you're laughing because
you want to know my answer?
Yeah.
I would absolutely 1000% look at these pages.
Yep.
It sounds incredible, even with the, little missing pieces of the query. I think it sounds incredible. I could see it on screen already, thinking about actors for
Casey and Sarah.
So don't forget, August 27th, Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Link will be below. We're having our August live AMA. Come hang out with us. Last time there was like 150 people, so woo us.
And there's going to be lots of us.
Yeah,
ask us questions, all that jazz, make jokes, talk about the seemingly impossible love life of Amanda Dean.
Great idea. I think
yeah.
it's a great idea.
Anne, why don't you take us out, please?
All right. Well, author, if you are still looking for an agent for this, you have some interest here. So maybe you can query one of us. We would love to kind of see this. And if you are already picked up, congratulations. This does sound like a really compelling read. So good for you. Um, Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Quelling Your Query Conundrums. If you have a query that you're conundruming about, please go ahead and email it to us at the link below. And we hope to provide you some information that will be useful, helpful, and hey, maybe you'll even get some asks from us here right on air if you do so. You never know. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.